From the outside, Brielle's life looked enviable. She had a luxury apartment overlooking the city skyline, a curated Instagram feed full of elegant dinners and weekend getaways, and a man who seemed to worship the ground she walked on. Damien was charming, successful, and attentive. Together, they were the couple everyone secretly envied. Flawless, stylish, and inseparable. But behind the filtered photos and public displays of affection, something far more unsettling was beginning to fester. Their relationship had begun with intensity, a whirlwind of romantic gestures and declarations of love that made Brielle feel like she had found something rare. Damien knew all the right words to say and all the moves to make. He tailored himself to her interests, always appearing exactly when she needed him, always knowing what to say to disarm her doubts. She convinced herself it was fate, not manipulation. What Brielle didn't know was that Damien wasn't the only man claiming to be in love with her. On the margins of her carefully curated life, another man waited, Lucas. He was quieter, less flashy, but equally taken with her. Unlike Damien, Lucas had never made grand gestures. Instead, he had lingered as a presence in the background, the co-worker who remembered her favorite tea, the friend who checked in when she was sick, the one who asked how she really felt when everyone else was distracted by the surface. Brielle had never noticed the rivalry brewing between the two men, at least, not at first. Damien, with his charm and confidence, seemed unbothered by anyone else in her orbit. But as time passed, his behavior shifted. What began as light teasing about her work husband turned into veiled accusations, late-night arguments, and a possessiveness that made Brielle increasingly uncomfortable. She brushed it off as insecurity, a flaw she could live with, but the truth was darker. Lucas, on the other hand, had never spoken his feelings aloud, but they simmered beneath every shared glance. Every moment he lingered in conversation, he saw what Damien was doing, how he isolated Brielle from her friends, how he subtly belittled her ambitions, how his affection often came with strings. Lucas wanted to protect her, but he also wanted her, and that conflict would lead him down a path he never imagined. Everything changed the day Brielle found the envelope. It was tucked inside her handbag, slipped between her planner and wallet. Inside was a photo, grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Damien, another woman, a kiss. On the back, in block letters, were the words, "How long will you ignore the truth?" She froze, her breath caught in her throat, the weight of betrayal pressing against her chest. She didn't know where it came from, who had taken it, or why someone would send it to her. All she knew was that her perfect life had cracked open, and behind the glossy veneer was something rotten. Brielle didn't confront Damien, not right away. Instead, she watched. She replayed their moments together with new eyes, remembering the inconsistencies, the lies dressed as compliments, the smiles that now seemed hollow. She started keeping her distance, making excuses to avoid his company, pretending not to notice his rising frustration, and when she was alone, she stared at the photo until the edges blurred. Somewhere deep down, she feared the answer. Not just to the question of whether Damien had cheated, but to something far more painful. Whether her love had ever been real at all. Was she just another prize in a contest neither man had asked her to judge? The betrayal didn't lie only in the kiss captured on camera. It lived in the layers of deception, the manipulation masked as romance, and the dawning realization that her heart may have been up for rent all along, without her even knowing it. As Brielle's silence grew, so did Damien's suspicion. The man who once praised her independence now questioned her every move. Calls came more frequently, texts filled with clipped phrases and suspicious undertones. He showed up unannounced at her office, lingering outside the entrance, watching from his car like a stranger in his own relationship. When she smiled too long at a coworker, he noticed. When she went out without posting it online, he questioned why. His charm had soured, replaced by a tight control that no longer cared for appearances. Brielle began to suffocate in her own life. Her apartment, once a sanctuary, felt like a stage where she played a role written by someone else. She missed the feeling of peace, of certainty, of knowing who she was when no one was looking. But more than anything, she missed trust. Not just in Damien, but in herself. She had ignored the signs for so long, clung so tightly to the illusion, that when it shattered, it left her with nothing solid to stand on. Then, Lucas stepped forward. It began with small gestures. He offered her a ride home when Damien forgot to pick her up, brought her lunch when she skipped meals, walked her to her car when she stayed late at the office. None of it seemed romantic on the surface. He was simply there, dependable and calm. But underneath, there was intent. Every moment was a bid, silent, calculated, but growing louder with time. He never mentioned the photo, not directly. But one afternoon, as they walked to her car, he paused and asked, "Are you happy?" The question lingered longer than any answer could. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. Lucas had waited long enough. He began to act, not as a friend, but as a contender. Flowers appeared on her desk, simple, not showy. Her favorite snacks found their way into her drawers. Music he knew she loved played softly on the radio when he drove her home. And then there were the words, gentle, sincere, and persistent. He told her she deserved better, that she was being diminished, that love should feel safe, not suffocating. Brielle was torn. Damien was her present, but Lucas had become her mirror, showing her the woman she used to be before control disguised itself as care. Still, part of her wondered, was Lucas genuine, or simply playing a longer, quieter game? After all, betrayal didn't always arrive in the form of an affair. Sometimes it dressed itself in patience, in kindness, and the promise of rescue. She didn't want to be saved. She wanted to be seen, truly, honestly, without competition. Then came the turning point. Damien found the photo. She didn't know how, whether he had gone through her things or someone had delivered it to him directly, but he saw it and lost what little composure he had left. His fury wasn't just about being caught, it was about the threat of losing, not her love, but the control he believed was his by right. That night, he stood in her apartment, fists clenched, voice low and dangerous, demanding answers she didn't owe. She didn't shout back. She didn't cry. She just stared at him and felt nothing. Not anger, not fear, just a hollow certainty that the love she thought she had was never truly hers. She asked him to leave. He didn't protest. He slammed the door, and with it, the last remnants of their story collapsed. In the quiet that followed, Lucas waited again. A message arrived. "Whatever you need, I'm here. No pressure, no assumptions, just presence." But Brielle didn't respond. Not yet. She wasn't ready to choose between two men who had quietly waged a battle over her heart, without ever asking if she wanted to play. Love, she realized, should never feel like something you owe, or something that's won. And in the silence of her apartment, she began to wonder if the most honest love she needed to find was the one she had forgotten to give herself. In the days that followed Damien's exit, Brielle moved through her life like a shadow of herself. The absence of his constant presence should have brought relief. But what settled in was a heavy quiet, a stillness that forced her to confront what she had allowed to grow unchecked in the corners of her heart. The version of love she had accepted for so long had been a performance, and she had played her part so well that even she had believed it. People noticed the change. Co-workers tiptoed around her, unsure of what to say. Lucas, ever patient, remained near but respectful, offering comfort without pushing an agenda. But even his kindness now came with a weight. Brielle couldn't ignore the timing. the readiness with which he stepped into the void Damien had left. It made her wonder if Lucas had truly loved her for who she was, or if he simply wanted to be the man who won. There had been a contest, yes, but she had never agreed to it. Her heart had become the prize in a game where both men saw themselves as saviors, never pausing to ask if she needed saving. That realization stung more than any betrayal. She wasn't a damsel, she wasn't broken, she had allowed herself to be chosen, but had forgotten how to choose. With time she began to rebuild, not through grand gestures or sweeping changes, but in quiet moments of clarity. She cleared out the apartment, removing traces of Damien's taste, his preferences, his influence. She started reading again, books she once loved before life became about appearances. She called old friends, the ones she had pushed away to maintain a curated illusion. She walked alone, explored corners of the city she used to visit before her world became too small. Lucas remained present. He sent messages, thoughtful and spaced out, never demanding, always kind. But Brielle had learned to read between the lines now. Each word was carefully chosen, each interaction subtly hopeful. He wanted her to see him, not as a rebound, but as a solution. Yet love, she realized, wasn't a problem to solve. It wasn't something to transfer from one person to another like a lease. One evening, after weeks of silence, she invited Lucas for coffee. Not in her home, not at work, but in a neutral space, where the air wasn't weighed down by shared history or unspoken feelings. She listened as he spoke of his care, his concern, his admiration. She appreciated it, but as he spoke, she heard something else. Expectation, the quiet belief that his patience had earned him a place in her future. And that's when she knew. Brielle thanked him. She expressed her gratitude for his kindness, his support, his honesty, but she told him she needed something different now. Not someone to fill a void, not someone to rescue her from loneliness, not someone waiting for her heart like a paycheck long overdue. She needed space, to grow, to breathe, to remember who she was before love became currency. Lucas didn't argue. He nodded, eyes dimming with quiet disappointment. He understood, even if he didn't agree. And then, for the first time in their long, silent courtship, he walked away. Brielle watched him go, and felt no regret, no sorrow, only peace. Love, she finally understood, is not a transaction. It is not a reward for endurance or a trophy for persistence. It is not something to rent or sell or win. It must be chosen freely, without manipulation, without contest. In a world where two men had fought to claim her, Brielle chose herself. Not because she had no options, but because for the first time in her life, she realized she was not a prize. She was the story, and she alone would decide how it would end. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.